G'day and welcome back to Reality Check. Now, as you will know, one of the big issues with UAPs is the synchronicity, the connection between UAPs and nuclear facilities, nuclear weapons. It's long been recorded that there are often anomalous objects seen in or around nuclear facilities. Well, around about 65 miles, what's that, about 100 kilometers from Las Vegas, Nevada, there's a location in the Mojave Desert called Area 2 that's also known as the Nevada National Security Site. And the story we're bringing you today about what's been happening there is quite extraordinary. It's based in an area called Yucca Flat. It's very close, very, very close, just 18 miles from the super secret and very mysterious test facility known as Area 51. Now, back in the days when the United States began open-air nuclear weapons testing from the early 50s through to 1963, it used to be a thing to watch for the flash of the nuclear blasts from the top of the highest buildings in Las Vegas. It's amazing to think these days that the Vegas Chamber of Commerce promoted atomic tourism by distributing calendars and test bomb schedules with maps of the prime viewing spots. Area 2 was the location for 144 nuclear bomb tests comprising 163 detonations. It's also a special nuclear materials storage area where bomb components are protected by highly trained nuclear security teams, including today's witness. Now, there's been no full-scale nuclear weapons testing, explosive testing at the Nevada test site since 1992, since the US implemented a voluntary moratorium. But there are still subcritical nuclear experiments happening as part of the so-called Nuclear Weapons Stockpile Stewardship Program to ensure the safety and reliability of the US nuclear weapons stockpile. And that doesn't breach the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. There was, in fact, an experiment that was scheduled for April this year in a laboratory that sounds like something out of science fiction. It's 1,000 feet underground at this site, and it's where they do their critical bomb testing. So this is, by necessity, a highly secure area. And it's my pleasure today to welcome a gentleman by the name of Yoshua Shelton, who was entrusted during his military service to provide security at Area 2 in the early 2000s. Now, we've talked before on Reality Check about the obvious nexus between UAPs, paranormal phenomenon, and nuclear weapons and facilities. And what Yoshua is going to reveal today is quite extraordinary. It's a story that's never been told before. He was present at Area 2 during an alarming series of paranormal UAP events there. I've spoken to him and a range of witnesses, some of whom aren't yet willing to go on the record. But like Yoshua has actually testified already to the FBI, and we're indebted to Americans for Safe Aerospace, Ryan Graves, for putting us in touch with Yoshua. What has he seen? What have these witnesses seen? There's things like UAP craft incursions of the Area 2 facility, orbs, black triangles, disc craft overflights, animal mutilations, multiple so-called shadow beings inside the facility that evaded capture. Another one they call the White Lady, who passed through solid fences. And another possible different entity they call the Black Mass. Yoshua Shelton worked for the 99th Security Support Squadron at Nellis Air Force Base from April 2002 to April 2008. Yoshua, welcome to Reality Check. Give me an idea, sir, on what your job entailed. What was your role in nuclear security?
Well, thanks for having me, Ross. To talk about what I used to do, I began certified as a security forces patrolman. So that's your basic, just out in the field guarding the bunkers and stuff. Then I got my certification for entry control duties to run the entry control. And then eventually I was a central security controller, which basically oversees security operations for the entire installation. I did that for about 2 years. I was involved in two NSIs, which is where the DoD sends the inspector general out to inspect the facility. It's a very high stress position. It's one of the few positions where it's a failure for the entire facility if you mess up. Um,
Now, one of the requirements for anyone that works with nuclear materials is you have to go through this rigorous assessment, which requires you to do what's called the PRP. Can you explain that to me, please?
so the personnel reliability program, the goal is to get people to work with sensitive materials who are most trustworthy, the best qualified. Um, Basically, you have to have a pretty clean record, and you have to report anything that happens. Like, you can't get hypnotized. So we were outside Las Vegas. You can't go to a show and be hypnotized. I remember I had kidney stone actually once, and I feel sorry for the civilian ambulance, but they had to take me to the military hospital. And then when they got there, they got grilled by, I think it was OSI. And they were, because they had given me painkillers. And so they were making sure, like, well, what did he talk about? Did he say anything about where he works at and stuff? And I remember seeing them getting grilled as I was getting wheeled into the emergency room. So I felt kind of bad for them.
Because I mean, essentially, as part of that PRP, you're required to essentially be mentally assessed. You have to be a reliable, stable, psychologically normal human being.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility. You're talking about the most destructive weapons man has ever created. So they definitely do a thorough job of screening and then keep tabs on you, make sure that you maintain that PRP status. And if you get sick, you'll lose that PRP status for as long as you're sick, and then you get it back again.
To your knowledge, were nuclear weapons stored at the facility where you were patrolling?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. We numerous times we had to stand down on live nukes as they were being maintenance served or just moved in and out of the facility.
What's it like being up close to something like a thermonuclear bomb? I mean, I can't imagine anything more frightening, frankly, the idea of being next to something that can literally bring an end to civilization.
It's it's awe-inspiring at first, and then eventually it becomes just part of the job. I'm reminded of that scene in Doctor Strangelove where he rides the bomb down after he gets dropped from the bomber. Uh, I can't say if I replicated that or not, but yeah, it's an interesting experience, that's for sure.
But basically, your role, you were essentially in the military, but your role was to provide security and, if necessary, use lethal force to protect those nuclear weapons from any incursions.
Correct, and we were very clear about that. The entire perimeter was ringed with signs saying lethal force is authorized past this point. And should anyone actually break in, we were more concerned with neutralizing a potential threat than sort of interrogating, like, what is the threat or not. Like, we don't play around when it comes to nuclear weapons.
Now, crucially, there's no way that somebody could inadvertently stray. You wouldn't get a hiker or a tourist inadvertently stumbling across this site. There's absolutely no doubt that there is fencing around. Give me an idea of the level of security around this facility.
So we had a triple layer fence line system. And back in the day, the middle fence used to be electrified, but I guess they didn't do that by the time that I started working there. Um, I would say it is possible for people to stumble into it up to a certain degree because we were kind of hidden from sight by a pair of bluffs and then a mountain on one side. So we did get individuals very occasionally. I remember a group of teenagers that I scared the daylights out of one time when I was on an exterior patrol. But you once you get sight of where you're headed, it's extremely obvious what's out there. And most of the locals who would go off-roading or whatever, they would know, and they would know better than to come close. We had exterior patrols specifically to make sure nobody got too close, and then everybody else was on the inside.
So before you were assigned to this facility, had you heard stories during your training? Was there anything said to you when you arrived that there was anomalous activity?
So when I first got to Nellis, waiting to find out where I was going to be assigned, people that go to work main base and then people go to work area two, they kind of hang out together for a bit. And once I found out I was going to area two, there was definitely people talking. More the main base people were talking about stories they had heard about area two. Um, Not many of those stories made it to main base, but there was enough that people knew, like, oh, you're going somewhere strange.
And what did they mean by that?
Everyone had a different story, but there was a sort of there was an awareness that the place was just prone for strange things happening. Um, People would talk about, like, you mentioned the white lady was allegedly a ghost that people would see up there, but there would be other things like lights in the sky, lights near the facility. It was just it had a reputation for just being a strange place, which, talking to people that worked with nukes after I got out, it seems like that's true for every facility that has nuclear weapons or nuclear materials.
Yeah, it's interesting. My friend Bob Hastings, Robert Hastings, who wrote this excellent book, UFOs and Nukes, I mean, he's done an assessment, interviews with pretty much anyone who worked at every nuclear site in America. And indeed, he's talked to people overseas as well. And he says it's a very, very common feature. You'd be hard pressed to find any nuclear facility, particularly nuclear weapons facilities, where there haven't been, how does one say this politely, anomalous incidents. So take me to October 2002. You're assigned to this facility where there are nuclear weapons stored in bunkers. Your job is to use lethal force if necessary to protect. What did you witness? There was a particular incident that took place pretty soon after you arrived in October 2002.
So, ironically enough, it was actually my very first night. Um, when you first get on flight, you're not certified to be out on patrol yet. They're still finishing up a little bit of your PRP status. So usually you sit at the security control center and then you study for your upcoming certification. Um, so me and two other guys were waiting for, kind of studying, waiting for our PRP status. And sometime later in the night, because I worked night shift, one of the security supervisors came in and said, "Hey, I'm going to give you guys a tour of the facility." So cool. We went outside, loaded up in his Humvee. He took us out, showed us around, and then there was an alarm call for the perimeter. Um, the perimeter split up into MSCs called marker sensor zones, and there was a alarm call to an MSC where we could drive to and get a nice line of sight to. So the security supervisor was like, "Oh, this is perfect. You guys will get to see how we respond to alarms and how you do a walkthrough and all this." So we drove up to the top of this hill where we could oversee a significant amount of the fence line. And as soon as we got out of the truck, it was obvious that, or the Humvee, it was obvious that something strange was going on the fence. I remember looking over to the fence line, and at the specific MSZ that the alarm had been called on, there was a bright white light that was hovering right over the third fence line, so the innermost fence line. And it appeared, from our point of view, to be just right over the top, right on the top of the fence. There's a sensor that runs along the top, and it appeared to be right on top of that. I can't really describe any physicalities to it because the light was so bright.
Do you
But what
think it
was
was
really
solid?
that's I've wrestled with that. I mean, you couldn't see through it, but what was very anomalous about it was that it wasn't really illuminating the desert around it the way that you would expect a light to be doing. It was almost like it was self-contained. Um,
So it was self illuminating from within.
yeah, and yet somehow it was able to control the light it was giving out so that it didn't illuminate the desert around it the way you would expect such a bright light to do.
How big was it, Joshua?
So I was pretty far away when I saw it that night, but I mean, I walked that fence line for 6 years, so I grew very intimate with the fence line. Knowing the fence line as intimate as I do and the dimensions of it, I would say it was about the size of like an oversized beach ball, like the type you might take to the beach.
So,
Um,
a relatively small sphere, maybe what, a foot or so across.
I would say larger, maybe about 3 feet across.
Oh wow, okay, right.
About three
And
feet
and it
across.
was what you saw was a white color, or was it a different color?
It was, if I remember right, it was a whitish color. That's the color that's kind of stuck in my head is this whitish color. And what was peculiar about what it did was as soon as Whiskey 8 seemed to, the responding patrol, as they're driving up along the perimeter, it was almost like it was monitoring our radios because as soon as Whiskey 8 called it in, it started matching the vehicle speed to maintain an exact distance between itself and the vehicle.
So you're quite confident it's intelligently controlled. It's not a balloon that's bumped up against the fence. This is an object that's being intelligently controlled.
Absolutely, it had intent. It was not flying with the wind, and it specifically chose to follow the fence line, almost if it was riding it on rails until it got to a certain point, and then it made a choice to go in a different direction.
Is there any noise?
From where I would have been, if there was a noise, unless it was really loud, I wouldn't have heard it. Um, I did talk to one of the patrol members afterwards, but we didn't really know each other back then. I didn't get anything from him about a noise or anything.
What did he say he saw?
He said the same thing that when they were driving up, they suddenly realized that there was this ball of light sitting up on the fence line, and at first they were going to stop and get off on foot and do a normal sweep, but as they were approaching, the ball started moving, so they just followed it on the vehicle. It ended up being sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, by any measure, that in and of itself is gravely serious in a place where nuclear weapons are stored, isn't it? I mean, what was the response like inside the facility when it became clear that there'd been this unauthorized incursion?
So the initial response was very serious. It wasn't just the responding patrol. The alert fire team was mobilized and ended up chasing along with the patrol. Then we had a support patrol armed with a machine gun who also responded. So it ended up being 3 vehicles for a total of 8 people that were physically chasing this object. They chased it down the fence line for about a mile and a half till they got to a place that we call Culvert 10, and this is where I know that it can't have been anything natural or anything like that because the entire time it was like it was riding the fence line as if on a rail. But here the fence turned and curved to the right, and the object instead took a hard turn to the left and went out into the desert. Um,
Did you
as
get the
far as
impression, was this a surprise to the people there? Had people seen this kind of object before among the teams that had been working there before you arrived?
so I talked to over time, I talked to some of the people involved because it was my first night, so I didn't know them then. Some people had seen stuff. This was the most blatant thing a lot of people had seen. Some of the old timers had seen other more blatant things, but this wasn't exactly unexpected or too abnormal for the night shift. It seemed like the night shift was the one that would see things like this more often.
Were reports filed? Were you asked to make a statement? Was there any kind of interview that was done with you about what you'd seen? What kind of response happened after the fact?
So for this incident, I was not asked to write a statement or anything. As far as I can remember, I because I was so new and I wasn't really part of flight yet. I'm just not fully aware of what really happened as far as leadership. Um, I do know that historically, there's a disturbing lack of response to things that happen that you would think would merit a larger response. I'm sure some of the stuff we'll talk about later. I was frankly, my mind was blown that we didn't have, I don't know, somebody from DOD there trying to figure out what happened and why it happened.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. I mean, when we hear some of your other stories about what went on there, it does make you wonder if they knew more about these objects than they're letting on. Let's move on. There was another incident where a large disc shaped craft crashed after silently overflying the storage depot complex. Tell me that story.
So this one's a little disturbing for me because somehow I completely forgot about this incident, and I don't know how I could have forgotten because it was so obvious. It was right over my head. And when we talked, you got in contact with Robert Hastings, who I had originally talked to shortly after I had separated. Um, so I can't explain how I could have forgotten about this, but as soon as you showed me what I had told Mr. Hastings, I remembered the incident. Um, I was on the alert fire team, which was stationed at the alternate security control center, and we were outside. A few of the guys smoked, so we were outside with them, kind of joking and just hanging out. One of the other patrols was there, so it was a total of 6 people outside. And I remember that the guy that I'm facing, we're talking, joking about something, and he kind of looks up above my head and his eyes just go wide. And as soon as that happens, I kind of turn my head to look over my shoulder. And as I'm turning my head, I see this reddish glow that kind of approaches on the ground. And I crank my head up just in time to spot this. I mean, I hate to say it, but it was a classic flying disc shaped object. I don't think that it was physically on fire. It was almost like this, almost like magma type glow was wrapped around the front of it, and that was what was illuminating the ground underneath it. But it was flying maybe 200 to 300 feet above our heads, very low. And as it approached and came over us, it actually deadened sound wherever it moved. Like the natural sounds of like the building right next to us, the desert, other patrols in the distance, they got very faint, almost like when you stick your head underwater. And as soon
Is
as
there
it
any noise
cleared,
from the object at all? Do you hear anything like a propeller or a jet or a turbine?
nothing like that. A little bit of a hum, but I don't like I don't know if it was the object creating the hum or maybe its interaction with the atmosphere.
Now, let's not beat around the bush here. This is a craft, a solid physical craft of some kind, breaching the airspace over what is probably one of the most sensitive facilities in the United States, if not the world. This is where thermonuclear weapons are stored. Describe what happens.
So the object came right overhead, and you could tell it was losing altitude because it was dipping down lower as it came and passed over us. As soon as it was clear of us, that's when sound returned and you could hear everything normal. We immediately got on the radios. By the time we got the first radio call out, the object had cleared the perimeter fence line, and it seemed to go behind this area that we call the bluffs, which is what kind of blocked us from view from the rest of the desert. And once it went down behind the bluffs, there was a massive flash of like orangish reddish light, and it was so big that all of us kind of braced ourselves because we honestly thought whatever this thing is, it's just crashed, and like it's such a huge explosion, we're gonna get knocked off our feet.
How big was
And
the object?
I'm a little hesitant because at nighttime and you don't have a good reference, I estimated it was 200 to 300 feet above our heads. If that estimate is right, and I'm fairly confident that I'm right about that, I would say it's about 45 to 50 feet across. So it
Wow.
was a good size object. It wasn't a drone. It was very large. I've
Could
been
it have
next to
been
military
could it have been an
aircraft.
aircraft of some type? Maybe a blimp or is there any kind of known prototype or craft that you can think of that might plausibly explain the shape that you saw?
So it was definitely not a conventional aircraft. It had no wings. It was a perfect disc shaped object.
Any
Um,
windows, lights?
we only saw the underside, and the underside was perfectly smooth. There was no, I mean, it did go by pretty fast, but there was no obvious markings, no obvious
Was it?
signs of.
Did it have a metallic sheen to it, or was it? of unknown construction. Did you see? Did it look constructive?
It definitely looked like it was something that was built, and whatever this reddish glow at the front of it was, it consumed about a quarter of the craft or the object, and it was reflecting off the bottom. So that's why I know that even though it was dark, that's why I know that it definitely had a sheen to it of some sort. Like it was able to reflect that light from this glow.
And so you hear this massive explosion. Was there a concussion? Was there a
So
physical force from the blast?
So that's the thing. We didn't hear an explosion. We saw as soon as it went under or behind the bluffs, and again, it was definitely on a downward trajectory. We saw the bright flash of that orangish light. There was no sound, and we braced ourselves. There was no sound. There was no concussive force. There was nothing that you would expect. I mean, we kind of felt stupid because we suddenly like you do this dumb pose where you duck down. Nothing, no sound, no force,
So
absolutely nothing.
what's the response to something like that? Clearly, something has breached the airspace over an incredibly sensitive facility. You've obviously got to go and investigate.
Yeah, so I know on the central security controller side, one of the first things that he would have done would have been to contact main base, to contact the air traffic control tower. So I know that they would have done that. I don't know the results of that from that night, but as far as us out on patrol, we immediately went mobile. Anytime there's like a significant security incident, but no specific threat, everyone goes mobile. Everyone's in their vehicles, fully kitted up, ready for something to happen. The exterior patrols, Oscar 1 and Oscar 2, they were dispatched out to go to the bluffs because we expected an object to be crashed there. We fully expected to find like hurt people, something. So they immediately went out there to start looking for this object, and they found nothing. There was nothing out there. Now, granted, we were limited in how far we were allowed to go from the perimeter to like maybe 300 to 400 meters. Um, but I just find it incredible to think that there was no wreckage, that there was nothing, no signs of this accident.
Now, one of the things that you guys carry are night vision goggles and thermals. Did anybody use thermals on the site where this object had allegedly impacted with the ground or had been in the area to see whether there was any residual heat?
I don't know if the exterior patrols had the thermals at the time. I'm not 100% sure, but they definitely carried night vision, and they would have used the night vision for sure. Um,
Could it have been a meteor? I mean, could what you have seen have been a straightforward meteor? I mean, you say it flew overhead, it was reddish orange. Is a meteor a possible explanation?
I've thought about that, and the thing is, this object was moving fast, but not that fast. It would have been moving at about the speed of like a Black Hawk. I've been overflown by Black Hawks. I've flown in helicopters. It was moving about the speed of a Black Hawk. And meteors, they move at terminal velocity. They can't control their speed.
And for what it's worth, my friend and colleague Robert Hastings has checked to see if there were any reports of bolide meteors or in that area, indeed in any state adjacent at that time, and there weren't. There were no such objects. So in the fall of 2004, another incident took place. You were patrolling outside a storage depot. Your patrol was called Oscar 1, and you were patrolling the desert, and there were bluffs to the north of the storage area that you used for overwatch because they were high and you could look down from them and keep an eye on the site. What did you see one night?
I'm not a I'm not a fan of this story. Um, so those bluffs actually is where that object went behind when it went apparently when it went down when it crashed. Um, I remember that night. We had an interior patrol call over the radio and say that they thought there was a truck on the eastern perimeter, kind of up on the mountainside. They thought that they were seeing a truck up there. So we responded. We went up to on top of the bluff so we get a good line of sight to the desert and to the mountainside. And I pulled out my night vision and I saw these two lights. They were right next to each other, moving together. And through the night vision, you could see them. You could see them dip and illuminate the ground and come back up exactly the way truck headlights would do. So we were pretty confident. Okay, this is a truck. Now we would very occasionally have civil off-roaders that would go off-roading. They would get lost. Some people knew we were out there and they would try to be looky-loos and see if they could like get a peek of something.
I
So
would.
it wasn't crazy that there was a truck up there.
And
Um,
so this area is outside of the actual facility, but it overlooks the facility. Is that
mhm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's well outside of the actual fenced off facility. So we keep an eye on it, and there is an invisible line where, okay, if the vehicle gets to this line, that's where we're going to need to move to intercept and turn them around. Um, as these lights get to that sort of invisible line, they suddenly go off, they blink off. And that immediately kind of put me on edge because that told me, okay, these aren't lost off roaders. This is somebody with intent. This is somebody that knows we're out here and that knows roughly how close they can get before we're going to respond. So, unfortunately, the lights were far enough away that with the night vision, I couldn't see a physical truck. It was only because of the night vision and the bobbing of the lights that I was confident it was a truck. So I could never confirm there was a truck there. Um, Once the lights went off, we figured, okay, they're going to go on foot and they're going to try to approach the perimeter. So me and my partner redeployed to about 300 meters away from the fence line in the direction that they would have to come through. A main base canine patrol was up here with us because he was exercising his dog and he heard about the radio call. So he offered to kind of bring the dog and help us out, which was perfect. So myself, my partner, the handler, and then his canine, we all went out about 300 meters from the perimeter. We got down into this dried up riverbed and we waited. Um, the desert is flat here. There's no cover, there's no concealment, and then it curves up to the mountainside. So it's physically impossible for anyone to get past us and get to the perimeter. So we wait, I want to say maybe 5 to 10 minutes before we get a radio call from one of the patrols on the inside. Now, Security One, our security supervisor, what he had done was he took all the patrols whose AORs were up against that edge of the fence line, and he had them go up on top of their structures at the end of their streets so they could kind of give us a bit of overwatch and kind of help us out and look out and see if they see anything before we do. Um, those patrols knew where we were roughly because I had shown my Pac 4 laser towards them, and you can see it on the night vision. So they didn't have eyes on us, but they knew roughly where we were situated. Um, so we get a radio call from one of the patrols that's providing overwatch from the interior, and they say, "Hey, Oscar One, be advised, you've got a light at your 12 o'clock." And they described this kind of bright light. They couldn't really tell if it was up in the air or on the ground because they just didn't have a good point of view for that. So if it was up in the air, it would have been very low. Definitely wouldn't have been high up in the air. Um, we looked, I mean, 12 o'clock right in front of you, we look and we can't see anything. Uh, like I said, flat desert, no cover, no concealment. We've got night vision, a lighter 800 meters away. You're going to see a lighter with that night vision. We see nothing. We look to the dog, whose job is to indicate. The dog's not indicating, so the dog's not getting anything either. Um, so we sit and we wait and we listen. You use your ears more than your eyes when you're in the desert at night. And a few minutes after that, another patrol comes on the radio and says, "Hey, Oscar One, be advised. Now you've got a light. It was either our 3 or our 9 o'clock, so either our left or our right." And this was alarming because it feels like we're getting hemmed in now, basically. And we look, can't see anything, can't hear anything. The dog's not indicating. Same situation, no cover, no concealment, impossible for anyone to be hiding, let alone a bright light. I actually called my security one, my security supervisor, and I asked him to switch to a clear talk channel because I kind of wanted to know what they were actually seeing. And when we swapped channels, I I straight up asked him, I was like, "Hey, are you guys messing with us? Like, are you guys screwing with us?" And he tells me, "No, I've got eyes on it. I can see it. You got to light your 12. You got to light your 3. Like, this is real." So within maybe a minute or two of swapping back to the normal radio channel, a third patrol calls over the radio, and they sound pretty alarmed, and they say, "Hey, you have a light at your, it's either 9 or 3, depending on which one the first one was." And that meant we were almost completely hemmed in by these lights, which felt very threatening to us.
And they're not, at this stage, they're not inside the facility, but they're getting dangerously close to the fence line.
No, they were, whatever these lights were, they were interested in us. They were not interested in the facility, because we were about a good 300 meters away from the fence line and from the outermost fence line. We were out in the desert.
So finally, what do you see, Joshua?
Nothing. We see nothing. We hear nothing. The dog is not indicating. And within 30 to 40 seconds of that last light being called in, one of the original patrols calls over the radio, and they're very alarmed, and they shout. They're shout. I can remember them shouting, "The lights are rushing you." So when I talk to people afterwards, from their point of view, they all agreed with this. These 3 lights showed up, one in front, one to the right, one to the left of us. And then, as if on cue, all 3 lights rushed exactly to our position where we were at. From our point of view, we didn't hear anything, we didn't see anything. The dog never once indicated, it showed no signs of stress or anything. What I have difficulty explaining is what happened right at that moment, because the radio was going constantly. We were getting constant radio chatter, and at this point, I was very experienced. I've been out there for a few years. I have been on-scene commanders for exercises and on-scene and real-world events. I understood that you live and die by your radio when you're in a tactical situation. Um, I can't explain why I didn't notice that we weren't getting transmissions over the radio anymore. Um, Let me explain our point of view first and why this is so anomalous. So, from our point of view, we get that call that these lights are rushing our position. I look to my alpha and I tell him, put a round in the chamber, because whatever this is hostile. I tell him, put a round in the chamber, put a grenade in the grenade launcher. This is serious. K9 follows suit. I'm watching 12. My alpha's watching 3, and then K9's watching the 9. We sit for, I want to say, a good 10 minutes in silence, waiting for something to happen, for us to hear anything. And absolutely nothing happens. And after 10 minutes, that's when I finally get the idea that I should contact the patrols on the inside and see what they see. And maybe to civilians, it won't make as much sense, but I know to any veteran, this is immediately anomalous, because you, like I said, in a tactical situation, you live and die by that radio, and if you can't see the threat, you're in constant communication with the people that can.
Do you
I
think that
cannot
something?
explain.
Do you think something was manipulating your mind?
I don't know. I can't speak to
But is
that.
that your
I honestly.
is that your suspicion that the way that you didn't think about using your radio or noticed that the radio wasn't working, that is anomalous, isn't it?
It is, and as much as I don't have any evidence for it other than what I experienced, I have to say that yes, something very much influenced the 3 of us to not think about, to it was almost like, I mean, we didn't even realize that we weren't getting radio transmissions anymore, even though right before that there were constant radio transmissions. So we didn't even realize our radios weren't working. We weren't hearing the radios, and I carried my radio right here next to my ear. It's impossible I wouldn't have heard it. um, I can't explain why I sat there for 10 minutes as a seasoned on-scene commander, already to numerous incidents, and did not think once to call the other patrols on the inside. Um,
There's another incident And this time it involved apparent entities, beings, humanoid shaped beings. Tell me about that.
Um, to kind of put I guess, a finisher on the previous incident, I did want to say that we did find out that we basically had lost about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes of time. We,
Wow. And did it
we
feel like that long length of time?
no, no, and that was basically after we were there for 10 minutes. I tried the radio. I tried a radio check when I realized, wait, no, nothing's transmitting. We couldn't get through on the radios, so I made the call. Let's go back to the perimeter and make visual contact with the patrols on the inside, thinking our radios were fried or something. When we got, it was almost like we crossed a line, an invisible line. And as soon as you cross this line, all three of our radios started transmitting again. We started hearing people on the inside transmitting.
And were they
Um,
freaking out that you weren't responding?
yes, everyone was looking for us, and that's also what I can't explain because it was we were in a kind of, from their point of view, our original position was kind of hidden to where they couldn't really see us. They knew where we were at. But once we left that position, it was flat desert. There's just no feasible way that patrols using night vision with high ground wouldn't have seen us walking. And nobody spotted us until we got close to where we had stopped our vehicles at. That's when patrols spotted us, which was about the same time that the radio started working. Um,
Oh, that's
I was
really
told by
freaky.
my
So basically, they couldn't even get visuals on you at a time when you really should have been able to be seen.
it should have been clear as day that we were walking back to the perimeter. They should have seen us long before, especially with night vision. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Wow. So this presumably was reported through your command hierarchy?
So I was told to immediately in process to speak to Security One, our flight chief, and I wrote a statement about what happened. And he actually, as soon as I walked in, he was like, where are you guys?" He was pretty livid. And I was confused because I thought only like 10 minutes had passed. And then he showed me, not only did he show me on the clock, but he showed me on the security blotter that like it had been, if it was, it was either 20 or 30 minutes more than the 10 minutes that I thought had passed. Um, I don't know what happened after that. And this is one of those things that is kind of like, okay, shouldn't this merit some sort of response from higher up? But as far as I'm aware, I don't know. I nothing.
So they took a statement from you and nothing changed, nothing happened.
No, and it wasn't like anyone came to get a statement from me. I just wrote a statement for our flight chief, and then he would have submitted it to leadership, and that's it.
Wow. Okay. Now let's go to get where things start getting very
Hmm.
interesting. Let's talk about the shadow beings.
So there's the main incident that I know you want to discuss, but there was a history of people spotting these shadowy figures. We spotted one early on to when I was first out there. I actually shone a spotlight on it because we thought it was our flight chief watching us carry out an exercise. And I shone a spotlight on it to identify him. And when I did, it just disappeared as soon as the light hit him. And I mean, there was 16 of us that saw that happen.
How do you know it was there?
So that specific time, we were carrying out an assault and recapture exercise at the maintenance plants where they would do maintenance on the weapons. And our flight chief usually would go out into the desert and kind of get on a bit of high ground so he could oversee everything and see how we were handling the situation. He called exercise terminate. And then once he did, we basically fell into formation in front of the maintenance plants. And right in front of us is a row of four buildings that were used way back in the day. When I was there, they would only use for storage. And one of the buildings on the far right used to be an old chow hall, and there was a ladder that you could take to climb up on top of it. So as we're sitting there waiting, we spot this figure pacing back and forth on the top of the old chow hall, and
Now
we
these are
immediately assumed.
these are they're half like a 44-gallon drum. They're like half of a 44-gallon drum, aren't they? They're what do you describe those buildings? I've forgotten what you call them, but essentially
I
it's a curved
yeah,
building, isn't it?
the maintenance plants. Yeah, I forget what that design is called. Yeah, the maintenance plants and then the bunkers are. These were just sort of normal, small buildings,
So they were flat
very
roofed.
small. Yeah, they were flat roofed.
Okay. And what do
Um,
you see? Where is this figure standing?
so this figure would have been from where I was standing a good 40 meters away, which is relatively close, and it's pacing back and forth on the top of the roof at the front.
And how do
So
you
it.
see it? Because you told me earlier that you had to shine a light on it. So
Mhm.
this is in darkness. How do you know it was there? What did you actually see?
So it was solid black figure, and you could see it very clearly because the entire perimeter is lit up, and when the clouds are low, it throws that light up, and you can see it silhouetted up against that light. It was not hazy. It was not. It was very clearly seen.
Humanoid?
Humanoid. I mean, we assumed it was our flight chief. We were so confident it was our flight chief that
Was
we
it
started
clothed?
calling to him.
Clothed?
Can't tell any details like that. I mean, it was pure black, and we couldn't tell any details like that.
Height?
I would have estimated if that was a real person, and because I had carried out so many operations right there in that area, I know it very well. I would have estimated to be about 6 feet.
Right. So standard
I'm very confident in that.
tall male human height.
Mhm.
Did it look like it had the build of a male or a female?
Impossible to tell, but I mean, we assumed it was our flight chief. Like there was no because it kind of looked like him a bit, like he was a bit lankier. Um, there was nothing like we didn't see it and thought it was anything strange.
So you shone a light on it and it
Mhm.
disappeared. How many people saw that shadowy object?
It was 16 of us, 16 of us, because we were all sitting there and we were calling to the figure, thinking it was our flight chief. And then when it wasn't responding, I took a spotlight from one of the other members, and then I turned it on, and as I cranked it up to the building, as soon as the light hit the legs, that's when it just disappeared.
And when you say it disappeared, it literally physically disappeared.
Hmm. It was there one moment, gone the next.
Did you go and have a look at the top of the building to see if there was any heat source or any marks on the top of the building?
So we went and looked. Nothing. I mean, yeah, not. There's a bit of gravel on top of that roof, um, and there was no indication that like somebody had been up there recently or anything.
Could it have been, I don't know, some kind of illusion? Could it have been a bird that for some reason looked like the shape of a human?
So no, it couldn't have been something natural that was projecting the shape of a human because it was too clear. We were all extremely convinced initially that this was a our flight chief, a physical person. It couldn't have been a trick of the light, nothing like that. It was way too solid a figure, and there was nothing reflective around there or anything.
So that was the first of the shadow beings incidents that you experienced.
Mhm.
Did you make a report of that incident?
No, because it was too common. That specific because it was so low stakes. We didn't feel there was a security threat or anything.
But
Everyone
wait a
kind of
second.
laughed it
I
off.
mean, let me devil's advocate for a moment. I mean, it sounds crazy. I mean, there's an illogicality here. There's an irrationality here. There is clearly an unauthorized humanoid in the facility, inside a facility with thermonuclear weapons, who's not part of your security patrol. They should not be there. That, by definition, is a security breach, isn't it?
Absolutely. I guess the reason why the second incident was a major thing was because there was more evidence that this was a living entity.
Well, let's
But
go to that.
this,
Let's go to
okay.
that then.
So the second incident, this
When was
was
this?
this, if I remember right, would have been about 2006. If I remember right, it was about 2006. Um, so we every night we would carry out an exercise. It would vary what the exercise was, but this night we were practicing recapture and assault operations, and we had a dedicated training structure for it, where it was an empty bunker, no weapons or anything in it, but it was just like the real thing. And I was on scene commander for for that exercise. And when you were dealing with nuclear weapons, in normal CQB, you want to secure the perimeter of a building, and you want to make sure that your backs are covered and all this. When you're dealing with nuclear weapons, you have to get custody of the weapon immediately, so you don't take the same safety or security measures you would take. So we get to the structure. We set up the assault force. We haven't swept the desert behind us or to the sides of us because, again, you have to get to the weapon. Um, but we have an oversight patrol who's up on high ground, and they're several hundred meters away, and they are overlooking everything. They can see everything, and they can see behind us. And if there's a threat, they can engage it with a machine gun. Um, as we as our assault force is getting ready to go in, the Overwatch Patrol, Whiskey 11, calls over the radio, and they say, "Hey, be advised, you've got two individuals in the desert behind you. They're proned out in the desert behind you."
And is this
Okay.
inside the facility or in the desert outside the fence?
This is inside the facility, and it's in the desert in between streets. So in between
Wow.
streets where the bunkers are at, there's
So
a
this is a
about a
this is
hundred.
this is a serious breach of security.
This is as serious as it gets. But we assumed it was part of the exercise. Initially, we assumed it was part of the exercise. So I told the assault force, go in, and then I told the machine gunner on the Humvee that's parked in front of the doors, keep an eye out behind us, be aware, assuming again it's an exercise. Within seconds, though, our security one, our flight chief, comes with the radio, and he asks for Whiskey 11 to say again, to make their report again. And Whiskey 11, also assuming these are two individuals that got put out there, because we would grab other patrols, like be bad guys, so that we would have someone to exercise against. So he tells them, "Oh, I've got eyes on two individuals. They're prone down in the desert. I forget the distance. It was within like 50 to 75 meters behind us, though." And then security one immediately calls control, and he calls for an exercise terminate. And as soon as he says that, I know, oh, this is real world. Like something's
So
happening.
so you start putting live rounds into your guns at this stage.
So uh, we exercised with life rounds, which I know sounds
Wow.
crazy to some people, but yeah, we trained how you fight. Um, so I yanked the assault force out of there, and my first job is I'm going to set up a sweeping element. Security one calls a code red response. Code red being a security incident inside of the facility, not on the perimeter, and that's as serious as it gets. Like that's an extremely serious event.
So
So
if you see these people, are you entitled to use lethal force to stop them?
we are entitled to use lethal force. We would attempt first to apprehend them, um, but I mean, we had enough leeway that if we even felt that they were hostile, we could have used lethal force. But you do want to first attempt to apprehend. Um, But that being said, we were ready to use lethal force. Absolutely.
Do you see what these people or beings are?
So we set up the sweeping element, pushed out into the desert, and the way that I organized people was one guy would have naked eyes, the guy next to him would have night vision. That way, you got two different modes of seeing. And then we also had the handheld thermals. Um, our our Overwatch patrol that was seeing the whole thing, they could see the individuals on the thermal the entire time because they were giving us information on exactly what they were doing.
Are
And
they
according
recording? Are
to
they recording this? Is there any recording of the images?
no, the thermals we had didn't have recording capabilities,
Right.
unfortunately.
Sorry for
Um,
interrupting. Keep on going, please.
no worries. So as we are moving up, Whiskey 11 that's on Overwatch tells us that they're reacting to us, that they're basically adjusting to how we're approaching to constantly keep concealment between them and ourselves. That definitely tells me that these are people. We assumed they were people. They're intelligent. They don't want to be caught. They don't want to be found. Um, so I've talked to one of the guys that was overwatching on the Humvee that was at the front of the structure. So not the machine gun team. He told me that he was getting intermittent sights of the individuals on the thermals. So he was also seeing individual thermals intermittently, but because his angle wasn't as good as the Overwatch machine gun team, he couldn't keep them constantly inside of the thermals. But from our point of view, when we got to within 15 to 10 meters of the two individuals, um, Whiskey 11 called over the radio and said, "Hey, they just disappeared. They just apparently just blinked out." We went to the position where they were at, and you could see on the ground that there was scuff marks from dragging, as if someone had been proned out and moving, crawling. With our handheld thermals, you could see residual body heat on the ground as well that was quickly dissipating.
So how many
Um,
seconds after they were there did you get there?
Oh, as soon as they told us that they disappeared, I told my guys to rush forward because once you lose sight, you can't take the risk that they're gonna. I would say 3 to 4 seconds.
Did you or any members of your team at any stage see these shadowy humanoid shaped beings?
The only visuals was on the thermals. Nobody that I know got eyes on outside of the thermals.
Now, I understand there's an incident where you looked up at one stage and there was a figure standing about 100 meters distant. You've
Mm.
told me about this previously. Is this a separate incident or is this incident?
No, this was a separate incident,
So
and this
tell
was
me that
actually,
story. So this is one of the incidents where you actually personally saw these so-called
yeah,
shadow beings.
absolutely. This was I was on an exterior patrol, so we were not in the inside of the perimeter. We were outside of it, and there was an area where Red Horse, which is like the Air Force construction people, they train at with their heavy equipment, and it was tucked away, kind of in a valley in between two mountains. And we were in there. Me and my partner were in there as exterior patrol, and we were just kind of, joking around. Just we got 12 hours to kill. And as we're sitting there talking with each other, out of the corner of our eye, both of us at the same time spot this figure that is running in between two of the buildings that the Red Horse people use to store equipment. And then I think one was like their bathrooms or something. And it was silhouetted by the moonlight because it was a full moon that was kind of behind. And so it was silhouetted by the moonlight. It was very easy to see. You couldn't tell any details because it was kind of far away, but it appeared to be very tall. Definitely got the impression that it was very tall, especially because we knew the buildings. And when it approached the building, knowing where the roof was at, you could tell that this was a very tall individual.
How tall?
I would estimate easily over 6 feet, maybe 7 feet.
Wow.
And again, that's knowing the height of this roof very intimately because I had been there so many times.
And is it a
Um,
humanoid shape?
it's a humanoid shape. Um,
Is it running like a
what
human?
was it ran like a human, but what was aberrant about it is so we knew the distance between the buildings, and it was crossing a distance that would have been about 120 feet in maybe 4 seconds.
So
So
it's a
it
pretty
was
fast, powerful being.
extremely fast, because that is what really got our attention. After we spotted it, we watched it run, and it did it two or three more times in between the two buildings. And also, the buildings weren't perfectly lined up with each other, they were kind of offset. So it's 120 feet, but then also a bit of a diagonal distance. Um, so, whatever this thing was, it was crossing that distance extremely quickly, far quicker than the person should have been able to.
I'm just figuring out how much the speed is for 120 feet in 4 seconds. Um,
I'd
it's
love to know.
30 feet per second. Wow, that's incredibly
Wow.
fast.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I don't know Usain Bolt's speed, but I bet he'd be hard pressed to match that figure.
I'm pretty sure he would. So, do you pursue the figure?
um, After we watched this for like a good minute as it went back and forth, me and my partner looked at each other and we both had the same kind of look on our faces. And basically, we figured, hey, this is outside our area of responsibility. It's not approaching the perimeter. It's not approaching the facility. It's not our problem.
So
So
you
we
didn't chase
kind
it.
of moved back. No, absolutely not.
How much of this do you reckon, Joshua, is? I mean, I'm not playing any disrespect to you, but do you think? I mean, a lot of what you're describing here, it feels to me like something's manipulating your mind. Don't worry about this. Just ignore this. I mean, it's kind of weird when you think about it that your mind responds the way it does. I mean, this is clearly a suspicious figure operating around a military facility. Um, it should twig your suspicions, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. Um, there's definitely times where it does feel tricksterish. Absolutely. Like there was many times where these phenomena felt very tricksterish, but then there was other times where it was so common for something strange to happen that unless it was a an actual security threat, you would just kind of shrug it off. Like it was too common.
Was part of the issue as well that in order for you to keep your personnel reliability program, your PRP, for working with nuclear weapons, was there a reservation or a stigma about reporting these incidents because people might think you're crazy?
So within flight, we were pretty comfortable talking to each other again because almost everyone had seen strange things. But definitely talking to anyone outside of flight, that's when you started thinking about like, okay, well, I don't want to screw up my career or like I don't want to lose my clearance. Like there was definitely a stigma about discussing things. You you'd maybe talk to like when the colonel would come down or the wing commander would come down, you would maybe only talk about like a major security incident. You wouldn't tell him that you saw a figure moving at 30 feet a second running back and forth between two buildings. You just wouldn't share that.
And yet, let's be honest about it, they should know, shouldn't they? I mean, this is one of, or close or adjacent to, one of the most sensitive nuclear weapons storage facilities in the United States.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think this culture of fear and ridicule is a major disservice to our security personnel because if I'm an adversary, I want to mimic the strange phenomenon in order to get close because I know that you're probably not going to report it. You're probably not going to investigate it. So it's a major security blind spot in my opinion.
Absolutely. Was there any time when you did pursue a shadow being that you saw?
Yes, and this was earlier to when I was out there, so it shows that I was not trained yet to kind of ignore things that weren't a major threat. Um, So I was on exterior patrol again, and we were rendezvoused with the other exterior patrol on top of the bluffs where things like this seem to happen. And as we're sitting there talking, I look up past the guys and it looks like a person. And I honestly thought it was a person, but kind of backlit. So as soon as I see the person, I issue a challenge, and then the figure runs, and it runs straight away from us. So I start running, and then the three guys with me, they start running,
Are you hearing
and
any noise of the figure running?
no, but I think I would have been too excited and too like adrenaline pumping too much to pay attention to something like that. Um, what is definitely strange was that you couldn't run at your full speed out there because of the rocks and the terrain. You would snap an ankle if you tried to run at full speed. But this individual was just balls to the wall, just going. Um, I mean, he left us in the dust. And then the direction where the figure went was where the bluffs drop off. And when it got to that point, we lost it. Like we kind of lost it. And so we assumed it must have hurtled over the edge or like jumped over the edge, and we stood on top of that ledge and looked around with night vision, and we should have been able to see anybody, and there was nobody there. Couldn't see anything.
How many individual experiences did you have where you or members of your security team saw these shadowy humanoid beings?
I either experienced or heard of maybe about a dozen over the
Wow,
6 years.
really? So
Um,
it's quite a common, quite a frequent occurrence.
it is, and that's, I think that's also why we, unless it was an obvious threat or unless we had more evidence that this was something physical, we wouldn't really treat it as seriously as we maybe should have.
Now, the reason why this matters, Joshua, is because what you're describing here, and this is no reflection on you, it's a reflection on the way the system works. There's a pattern, a clear pattern of incursions by something intelligent, some kind of intelligent being, possibly human, possibly not human, that is breaching one of the most secure, important, dangerous facilities in the United States. Now, it's a worry, isn't it, if these incidents aren't being properly investigated or reported? Do you feel from your experience and your time there that these incidents were being properly reported and investigated?
No, I don't think so. Um, the impunity of whatever this phenomenon was to evade detection, to get to wherever it wanted to be, that's alarming in the extreme. As a security professional, it just, I can't imagine dealing with something that you have no control over. You can't stop it. You can't prevent it. You can't catch it. Um, no, I definitely feel, especially with the more high profile incidents, that there should have been a bigger response.
What was the general response from your commanders to the fact that something or someone was breaching the security of one of America's most sensitive nuclear installations?
So I distinctly recall one time when our colonel, our unit commander, came in, just in a regular like morale check, basically. And he came by each patrol to kind of like talk and chat a little bit and stuff. And I brought up one of the incidents, and I was talking to him about it. And distinctly remembered the way that he literally just went, hmm, just like that. That was the full response. Um, I don't know. I can't explain that. I don't know why that was the response, but that was the only thing he said.
Okay, that's not the only kind of incident that you've witnessed, though. There's other incidents which are even more disturbing because they involve something getting in or near the bunkers where these nuclear weapons were stored. Can you talk about that?
So I think um, I think kind of one of the more uh, disturbing things that happened. We had a section of the bunkers that we called them Black World bunkers, and they were bunkers that when they were open, they were the only ones we weren't allowed to pull security on. I believe it was DOE that would bring in their own people to do security on that, and we actually weren't allowed to be anywhere near when those doors opened. But we still had to, in normal day-to-day operations, we still had to go to them and check the locks. You would, when you would start your shift, you would go to every single bunker, you go to the door, you would check the locks, make sure that these big giant padlocks are securely on. You would check the vents, these air vents, to make sure nothing's been put in the vents. Just do a general integrity check of the door. And one night when it was my patrol that was in that area, I went to do my check of these Black World structures, and I checked the lock. Lock was secure. I checked the first air vent, and there are these kind of like these. They had this big, heavy handle that you would lift up, and it would open it, and then you would just let it go, and it would clang really loudly. I check the first one. I check the second one. I let the thing go, and it clangs really loudly. And then something from inside smashed into that door. And these are 2-ton jacks, I think, is what we carried. So these were about 2 or 1 ton doors each, and there were two doors, and they're sunk into the ground. And something smashed into that door in response to me letting that second air vent kind of clang close. And it smashed loud enough that I jumped. Like it scared the daylights out of me.
So you know that there is something inside a
Hmm.
secure weapon storage area that even you are not
Hmm.
allowed to enter.
Yes. And when I reported it, it was sort of, okay, well, what's the integrity of the doors? And we can't do anything about it because we didn't have access to those structures. And as long as
But,
the integrity of the structure was intact, it wasn't on us
but
to
come on,
respond
something's
to.
inside there, isn't it, Joshua? How sure are you that there was something inside that
A
facility?
100%. 100% sure that something smashed into those doors from the inside. My partner was in the vehicle about a good 15 meters away, and they heard it because they jumped as well. That's how loud it was when it smashed into these doors.
So, whatever was inside that bunker, it's never investigated what was inside.
By us, no.
This is crazy. I mean, this raises. I can see why you've gone to the FBI. What was the FBI's response when you started telling them about this? I mean, the Defense Department, the Department of Energy, they're obliged under federal law to protect the nuclear weapons stockpile. To me, the fact that there aren't protocols in place to make sure that that facility was immediately opened and inspected to make sure that whatever was inside was caught, apprehended, that's outrageous.
Um, when I spoke to the FBI, they shared the same concern that I did. That I mean, these are glaring security vulnerabilities. Um, the only thing I can think of is that somebody must have known that this would happen and that there was no need for a response because they knew exactly what was there.
Have you ever heard of the Skinwalkers? The Ute Indian mythology about skinwalkers in and around Utah?
I have. I did some research for my previous job where I talked to some Native Americans about it, about the phenomenon. Yeah.
What do you think? Is it possible that's what you were seeing?
I wouldn't. I don't have a good frame of reference. I would say that having talked to some Native Americans about the Skinwalker myth, there's definitely some things that line up, but I don't have enough information to say like, oh, definitely or not.
One of the other things that really concerned me was animal mutilations. Did you ever witness any of these yourself?
Yes, one of them, and then I saw photos of a second one, though there were three in total.
What did you
Um,
see?
so this was towards the end of my enlistment. So I believe it was either late 2007 or in 2008 is I believe when it happened. And one of the exterior patrols was out along the perimeter, driving along the perimeter, and they came across the carcass of a donkey that had been put on the side of the road. Now, the animal had eyes and tongue removed. I'm trying to remember the exact details because there was three different animals, and I believe the first one had eyes and tongue removed, and then its stomach had been cut open, and the interior was gone, but there was no gore on the ground. There was no blood on the ground. There
So
was
completely exsanguinated, no blood and specific organs removed with presumably
yes,
extremely sharp and precise cuts.
there was no tearing. There was no nothing. The
So
one that I
this
saw.
wasn't animal predation.
No, not a chance. And I've hunted. I'm fully aware of the mess you leave behind when you get a buck. Like when you field dress an animal, I'm fully aware of the mess that it leaves behind. No, there was no, even though the second animal was the one that I saw when I was on extra patrol, which was a few days afterwards. This one had no signs whatsoever of even scavengers coming to the corpse. Um, this one was the same way. No blood, no organs, clean. It was
I just want
dead.
to I just want to put on record that from the work that Bob Hastings has done, it's quite clear that these animal mutilations have happened before at facilities like this. The other thing that Bob's talked about, he named another witness with his permission called Chris Cabrera, who worked at the same depot as you from 1998 to 2002. And there were multiple sightings of shadowy bipedal figures moving around inside the bunker complex that appeared not to be human. And Chris, on one occasion, describes entering a storage unit. Quote, I had a feeling of needing to turn and look behind me, and when I did, I saw a black mass deep in the back of the storage unit. It was just there, not moving, but I was able to make out a humanoid shape to it, what looked like a head, shoulders, and a torso extending to the ground. I had to look up at it slightly, but didn't see any other details because there was minimal light coming in from the entrance. The mass remained still and seemed like it was just observing me. My thought was to run towards the entrance, get out, close that door as quickly as possible, which I did. Clearly, there's a long history, Yoshua, of these shadowy beings in and around this particular nuclear weapons storage facility.
Yeah, and from the details that you just read to me, that sounds very familiar to things I've heard people. One of my sergeants saw almost the exact same thing, actually, in a different building.
And it's interesting because my friend Christopher Sharp, who publishes an excellent publication called The Liberation Times, he published an exclusive where a nuclear technician detailed serious security breaches at a US nuclear base at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. And again, it involved alleged shadowy beings. He said he witnessed a black mass in the shape of a person standing about 6 feet tall. He chased it unsuccessfully, and he was worried about losing his PRP accreditation if he reported it. And Bob Hastings also met another guy who served underground at Minot Air Force Base in an underground nuclear missile launch facility. He was taking a sleep when his missile commander suddenly began screaming, thereby abruptly waking. He said he was nearly hysterical. It took him a few minutes to calm the guy down. He told his deputy that while monitoring the launch console, which displayed the status of the 10 nuclear missiles they were responsible for, he looked out of the corner of his eye, saw some movement, and saw a tall, dark figure standing close behind him, basically human in shape, no discernible features such as a face. He thought it was a ghost and began screaming, and immediately the intruder disappeared before his eyes. And just to finish the sequence, George Knapp and Con Kelleher, in their excellent book Hunt for the Skinwalker, they also cite shadow beings. And again, this is at the Skinwalker Ranch. And they talk about how when the NIDS team, the Institute of Discovery Science team, were up on a ridge, they had infrared binoculars and they saw a fuzzy beach ball of light hovering a few feet off the ground. The round opening slowly grew into what looked like a tunnel of light, maybe 8 to 10 feet long, and the guy with binoculars looked in horror as some sort of large entity, humanoid entity, wriggled its way through the tunnel, stepped out onto the ranch, and ran up towards the ridge. The creature was dark, maybe 7 to 8 feet tall, featureless, but humanoid in shape. So, Yoshua Shelton, what the hell are they?
I wasn't aware of how frequently these were being seen. I had heard from some people, but I have a hard time thinking that it's coincidence that the exact same thing is happening around nuclear facilities, sensitive sites. I mean, I've heard civilians kind of describe the same thing, but it just seems to be so much more centered around sensitive installations. Um, Yeah, I just have a hard time believing that that's a coincidence or that we're all crazy.
So the FBI is now apprised of your concerns about, how does one say this, apparent shortcomings in the response by the Department of Energy and the Department of Defense to investigating these incidents. Do you think they're taking this seriously?
I know that the team I talked to was definitely taking it very seriously. Um, it's hard to tell what's going to happen, what's going to be the result of this. It feels very much, and that was the feeling I kept getting when I was working there was these are such high profile incidents, but yet there's no major response. It's almost like somebody knows and expects and knows that it's not going to be a real threat to the weapons.
But
Um,
that's, as you say, that's precisely what a potential foreign adversary would exploit. I note, for example, just this week when the drones flap was happening over Scandinavia, Vladimir Putin teased the idea of UFOs, whether real or not. I mean, a foreign adversary would want you to think that these were just anomalous paranormal phenomena, which weird in and of itself that you'd turn a blind eye to that, but something has clearly breached the security of one of the most dangerous facilities in the world, period. Right?
with impunity.
Yoshua Shelton, thank you so much for joining Reality Check. I sincerely hope that the grave national security issues that you've raised get properly investigated by the FBI. I think the Congress sadly has its head in the sand on these issues at the moment with its failure to pass the UAP disclosure laws. And I don't think we should be holding our breaths expecting a response from the new administration, the White House, anytime soon. But we can but hope. Let's sincerely hope the FBI takes this matter seriously. Thank you so much for joining Reality Check.
Thank you, Ross. Do you mind if I say one final thing?
Sure.
I agree with what you said about Congress, and I think that it's time we start looking for a solution ourselves and stop expecting the government to provide one. And I think that the very first step to take in that direction is to reshape the cultural narrative. I know plenty of guys who can corroborate everything that I've said, but they're too scared to come forward. They're scared for their careers and they're just scared of ridicule culture. I decided several years ago that I wasn't going to hide anymore. As you know, I originally contacted Mr. Hastings, and I was basically intimidated into silence, not through threats, but just sort of people that I trusted being like, well, you got to think about your career and what might people say and stuff. And I think that foundations like the Soul Foundation are doing great work, but I think that there's a cultural element that needs to be tackled on top of the scientific one, to where we need to reshape this narrative about this ridicule culture that has been weaponized against witnesses, been weaponized against whistleblowers. Um, there are little kids seeing things in their bedrooms that they can't explain. There are grown adults experiencing things that terrify them. And the people they should be able to turn to talk about these things, they can't because they're scared to death. And our academia is suffering from this crisis of bias, to where it's not that the data isn't good, it's that they don't like what the data says. So they disregard it offhand. So I'm very happy about shows like yours, and I think there needs to be a more concerted effort to reshape this cultural narrative regarding the phenomenon, whatever it is.
Wow, Joshua, I couldn't have said it better myself, my friend, and I'm so pleased you added that at the end of this. I completely agree with you. And the thing I find most, well, the word is sinister, is the fact that government seems to be prepared. The Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, they seem to be prepared to turn a blind eye to even acknowledging that this phenomenon is real.
Mhm.
And they're not letting us know why. So your
It's very true.
bravery, your courage, and being willing to come forward is what's absolutely fundamental. So thank you for being a whistleblower, and thank you for giving your evidence to the FBI.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And before we go, please don't forget we do our weekly question and answer, and we need your questions. So please send your questions in by email to realitycheck at newsnationnow.com. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.